Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, this is one of my favorite places that I like to be. And all of my listeners know this. I've been saying this from almost day one, is that when our guest comes, they come with a couple of things that I deem very expensive. Time. It is one of the most precious commodity given to every single man. 24 hours is given to all of us so that none of us can argue that one has more than the other. But what we do with that time is all up to us. How we think, how we process our thoughts, belief, all of that. How we utilize time. The other is their journey. The journey housed who they were, made them who they are today. The beauty, the power, the strength, all of that. And so we are honored to have our beautiful guest here so that Michaela could escort us, if you will, to the next part of our human development while we are here on this planet through her journey. Welcome so much to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, and it's already been a laughing pleasure to be with you. We warmed up.
That it has. Tell the folks the things that you have, that you're serving others through. I want you to tell them all of them because I've told people that we are creators and we create the things that we desire by how we utilize our thoughts. And we become designers of life versus one that is living by default. Tell them all the things that you have designed to serve mankind.
It's a very fun question. And it's a really interesting one because in my human design, literally, I need diversity. So I didn't quite cotton on to that till I was about, I don't know, in the 80s. And during that time period, I lived in Europe and I started studying all this other stuff. But for a good 10, 15 years prior to that, I'd worked in traditional medicine as an occupational therapist, and I specialized in head trauma. And what was fascinating to me was, why are people having these experiences in their life? Why did they call them in? And what are they learning on a soul level? I mean, when your brain is injured, you become a very different person. And yet all kinds of things can open up for them. In fact, that's what a woman told me yesterday on a phone call, how her life had changed dramatically in the last 2 years after head trauma. And she's had this amazing spiritual awakening. So I'm just a young therapist. And I'm thinking, what's going on with these people? And yet I was fascinated by the neurology of it and, what we can do differently and how to help these people heal. But it was only on the physical level.
Yeah.
And I knew that wasn't what it was all about. It was like Western medicine's great for that. And I just wanted to know about the deeper level. So I lived in Europe for 10 years between 1980 and 1990, and I was exposed to all kinds of things, learning how to use a pendulum, flower essences that saved my hide when I was really stressed. And I worked with an acupuncturist who was a physician, who was also psychic. And I walked into his office the first day and he says to me, "Why aren't you talking to your husband?" I just looked and went, okay. I thought I came here for something else. And I'm like, oh, am I that transparent or is he that smart? Probably a little both.
Yeah.
But he was a really gifted person and he opened up for me this whole world of energy medicine. So I worked with him for a number of years and then he said to me, "Go to this course." And I said, "Yeah, but I'm not completely fluent in French." He said, "Go anyway. It's energy." So he opened up that world of working with chakras and energy and healing. And I, of course, just jumped in and I got it. And I wanted to know more. And then a friend of mine, who I'd met in San Francisco and I was traveling, and I had a deviated septum at that point because my daughter had sat on my lap and she got, "Hey, Mom," and thrown her head back and smashed my nose. Yeah. And so I had a pretty good sized bump. And this friend of mine did some work on me, some energy work called quantum energetics. And my deviated septum was gone the next day. And I'm like, oh, I want to know about this. So it's all about healing for me. So when I came back to the US in 2000, I just launched myself into a lot of different certification programs, from hands-on healing to shamanic work, because I wanted to know what's the deeper level. And in that process, all these other realms began to open up. Past lives, talking to dead people, hands-on healing. It didn't matter to me because they're all connected.
Mm-hmm.
So when you work on the vibrational and energetic level, it helps the physical level because that's where everything starts. So I just was curious. It didn't matter to me whether it was flower essences I was learning about or essential oils or shamanic work in terms of how it could assist people, because people are ready for different levels of healing.
Yeah.
And some people really want to go deep and some want to stay on the, more the gentler level. And so that's what I've been doing. So I'm really here to serve people in healing in many different ways. So I still do transformational energy work, one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
I do psychic readings because I can, and it's fun and it's helpful.
Yeah.
It opens up doors for people that they haven't considered.
Yeah.
And then I do mediumship sessions, but they're really different from what other people do, because when I consider facilitating a conversation between somebody who's here on earth and somebody who's departed, my hope is that there will be healing that happens.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a conversation that couldn't happen when they were still alive, or there's a question, or it was an apology, or just, I love you. There are lots of possibilities. So that's the intention that I walk in with it, is that this will be healing for both parties.
Yeah.
And the other area I like to work in, because it's really fun and it brings all these things together, is land clearing. Again, it's energy work.
Mm-hmm.
But it involves going really deep into the land. And the land is just like us. It holds old trauma.
Yeah.
And that trauma then sets up a vibrational frequency that impacts the people on the land. It can go back hundreds and hundreds of years or more. And there are also a lot of spirits. So this is where the mediumship comes in.
Yeah.
I can talk to the spirits that are trapped there and help figure out how to release them and bring them to the place they want to be. And then, of course, there's doing the energy cleansing and the restoration work. So those are the 4 primary areas that I work in. And I love having this diversity. And I left Western medicine in 2020, and I had some interesting times there because when I worked in ICU, sometimes the nurses who knew me would say, "Can you go talk to this person? He's in a coma. Can you facilitate a conversation with him and his family members who don't know what's going on?" Or there might be, eventually I had to stop doing this because my very kind boss said, "You're out of your scope of practice. You're going to lose your license. So please stop doing it."
Yeah.
Like, yeah, okay. Yeah. But it was like, but, yeah, right. I'll lose my license.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Western medicine, I'm really familiar with.
Yes.
The process. Yeah, that is awesome. We have so much to unpack. I cannot wait. As our custom here at Threads of Enlightenment, we like to take you back. We're going down memory lane, if they say. One of the first space by which we occupy as humans, as we enter into the space called Earth, on this lifestyle after mom and dad has kissed us and brought us into from the hospital and threw us in this cage. I tell people, put us in this beautiful cage and start restricting us from that point on. And we have to climb out of this cage. It's a beautiful metaphor for life. But anyway, invite us into your family unit. What was it like to be a part of your family and the energies that move around within your family?
That's a really loaded question to me. So I'm going to tell you the straight up truth. But so there's like a really interesting bookend to this. And I thought I came into the family with this mother and father, but a year ago I learned that through mediumship that my father wasn't who I thought he was. So when I came in as a kid, I can remember coming in and looking around going, how did I get here? This is not what I thought I signed up for. It was incredibly dysfunctional, chaotic. There was violence. There was, drugs. It was just like insane. And I remember about 3 or 4 having all these great experiences out in nature. And I was so grateful that we lived in, Ohio, which was pretty safe.
Yeah.
And we had we had a ravine and lots of woods around us. And that's where I was really secure. And so I spent a lot of time outside talking to the elements and the bugs and the skies and interacting with them. And so I had this alternative reality from what was going on inside the house, which was, this is really spacious and beautiful and magical. And so science and nature were just like my salvation, but also very, very expansive for me as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I did have enough sense not to tell people about my experiences in nature because they probably would have thought I was nuts. So I just did my thing.
Yeah.
So eventually I had to make some choices when I was around 5 because I actually really wanted to either have my parents divorce or I wanted to die.
Mm.
And so I concocted this idea as a magical 5-year-old that if I was just a doorknob, I would be okay.
Mm.
Well, clearly, that was a magical thinking of a 5-year-old. Yeah. And I also dove off a picnic table at 5, thinking it would become a swimming pool. So I was a firm believer in creating your own reality. I didn't know how to create swimming pools. So I had a little wake-up call there. And the wake-up call was, you better figure out another way to deal with this family. Because A, there's no swimming pool. B, you're not a doorknob. And C, you can't take care of yourself yet. So I hung out there for a while, needless to say. And fortunately, my parents did divorce when I was about 10 or 11. And but the curiosity for me was, I grew up also in the Catholic faith.
Yeah.
I went to a Catholic school, but I thought it was all, using the Yiddish term, mishigash. Like, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
This is not my experience of God. Why are you trying to convince me of all this? Because I'm not buying it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was constantly raising my hand, and the nuns would call me and say, well, can you explain why blah, blah, blah? And, I was sure I was a pain in their side.
You weren't normal.
No, I wasn't. I was curious, but I didn't buy it. It just smelled too yucky. So when I went to college, I became a religious studies major because I wanted to know, well, how do other people experience spirit and God?
Yeah.
And how does their culture affect their perception, their cosmological understanding?
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. I was at a liberal arts school for a couple of years. And then my mother says to me, you have to pick a practical major. I'm like, but I'm in a liberal arts school and I didn't qualify for pre-med. She said, tough tamales, you're out until you pick something. I'm like, you've got to be kidding. No, she wasn't kidding.
Wow.
Her intention was actually to have me find something professionally that I could take care of myself.
Yeah.
I could support myself with. At that time, I didn't appreciate it.
Yeah.
I later did, but it was like, what are you doing? I'm so happy here. Like this. Oh, it was just such a creative environment. So I loved it. So I said, okay. I volunteered once as an occupational therapist for 3 or 6 months at Easter Seals. Yeah. I'll do that. And literally that's how I got to become an occupational therapist.
That wasn't that bad.
It was like,
choice.
Like what? Yes. So I left that school and took a year off and did my prerequisites and went to school in Boston, and I did really well. It was great. Again, it was diversity. It was science.
Yeah.
It was personal relationships. It was a very complex way to be in the world with people and helping people really restore their lives. So it worked for a while.
Wow. Let me ask a question then. As you stated, you were in a liberal arts study and everything was so good and everything was perfect. What did that feel like for you, the individual, when you make a statement like everything was perfect? What was happening to you, the individual, being in and exposed to those type of knowledge, the spiritual aspects, bringing and pulling knowledge and information from all over, and being in a library and being in that type of atmosphere? What was happening to you?
I felt like I was in the right place for the first time in my life. I was with people that wanted to dialogue, that wanted to stimulate conversations, that they wanted to expand my awareness and all the students' awareness. They were accepting of different viewpoints. And I had a really lovely community of friends that I felt like they were my tribe. And I
Yeah.
had never really experienced that in the other schools I'd been to. And I felt at home with
No.
these people who wanted to go beyond the mundane and ask deeper questions.
Yeah.
So my heart was just like, it was full.
Yeah.
I was happy, content, and I was so grateful.
Yeah. That is
And
powerful to
finally,
have.
Yeah, it was.
And then you're moving from spiritual aspect. I love asking these questions and taking people back, because then you can begin to see the thread in that individual life, and it's really a beautiful thing to unearth and witness as we engulf ourselves within the conversation. So here you are, you got your first set of training in the spiritual realm, and you're moving through now into the scientific realm. As you're there in the scientific realm, ushered in by mom's volunteerism, you're now going to volunteer to do that. When you got there, since you were already familiar with it, how did you begin to navigate within that space once you were there?
I always liked science, so that was really okay with me.
Mm-hmm.
And because science to me was opening myself to the wonders of creation.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like in this state of awe, as well as it was hard work, but it was fascinating to me. And years prior to that, I really wanted to be a neurosurgeon, but I didn't make it into pre-med, so I'm not a neurosurgeon.
Yeah.
It wasn't my calling, because I was really intrigued with how does this amazing brain work? How can it do all these functions and yet we can't see it working?
Yeah.
So there's there's the curiosity again. How does the universe work as represented by the brain? And so I got into that field, and I also recognized that I was able to contribute to people's lives in a very meaningful way.
Mm.
And that was important to me. That's always been kind of the principle. Maybe that's not the right word. That's been a quality or a guiding force in my life, is being of service and helping and being kind.
Where did you get that from? Where did you pick that up? Where do you think you said it's always been there? Where were you? How old were you when you were aware of that specific um, longing, if you will, or desire?
I think it actually came out of a survival strategy first.
Mm-hmm.
Which was, if I'm really attentive and I look around and I see what people need and I address that, there will be more peace.
Yeah.
And I can fly under the radar and not, be in a negative space with whomever was coming. And so that's how it started. But I also recognized that when I looked at my siblings and could feel and see their distress, that there was an opportunity there to do something to make their lives a little easier, or just extend some kindness.
Yeah.
And that felt better to me than not doing it.
Oh.
So yeah, I've never thought of it in that context. I think it's just always been a part of me.
Yeah.
But
yeah, so it's a powerful thing. Again, the questions excavate patterns, and you're beginning to see you. I'm beginning to see you um, begin as the embryo, if you will, and you're growing and growing. You were in the spiritual piece, and you were learning and ecstatic, went into the science, and that same feeling and energy is there of acquiring knowledge and learning, but yet open and experimenting of information and self. You see it, and then your thread of with helping and serving, forming before you even become. And so I always tell people, some people ask me things about me, and I tell them, I said, I am becoming. And they look at me and they'll stare at me when I say that. But to me, what it means is that I am becoming. There is room for so much growth and expansion that I don't know what I am becoming, but I do know I am becoming. And so I will say to them all the time, hey, Ken, what are you doing? I'm becoming. People think I'm a little nuts. But here you are, you're exposed to all of these and you're moving through life and you are in the science, you're beginning to get a sense of how you can become a servant to those who are in pain and in a series of trauma. While you were there, talk to us of some of those encounters that you were beginning to get as a young woman, exposed to all of this knowledge, and yet you're able to reach outside of self to look at someone beyond you and be able to, as you said, begin to help them, if you will.
When you ask brilliant questions, I love this. It's just so lovely. Thank you. I remember being in the liberal arts school one morning.
Yeah.
I got up at like 5 a.m. because I wasn't a good late night studier. So I'm sitting in my chair reading or something. And all of a sudden I hear these voices in my head talking to me. I'm like, oh, this isn't good. And I was quite sure I was getting ready to have a psychotic break. I'm like freaked out.
Yeah.
So I can't wait till 9 o'clock arrives and I can knock on the door of the therapist at the school. Right? Am I nuts? I'm like, help. She said, you're fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Which was so reassuring. But I also just went, I'm not going there right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then maybe in that first year also, I was not into drugs, but I did want to know what LSD was about. So I took it with some friends. My boyfriend, who was a philosophy major, who still is a philosopher and the dean at the same school we went to. It's like, oh my gosh. So, and this other friend of ours who became a lawyer and he was very serious. But so the three of us are out. We're having a trip, and I'm in the graveyard near our school, and I realized that rocks have consciousness.
Yeah.
Because I could feel that they were holding knowledge of what had preceded and what was going on. And I could see, hear, and feel that. But I couldn't explain to my friends how I knew empirically how rocks had consciousness. But I'm like totally convinced they do.
Yes.
And they're looking at me like, yeah, you're tripping. Okay, whatever. But I didn't forget that.
Yeah.
So I still talk to rocks.
Well, they do have it because there's a story in the Bible where it talks about Jesus said, if that these very rocks would cry out. And so that tells me that, and I tell people everything has a voice. Everything that is alive has a voice. It's just that we have been deprogrammed from hearing and understanding the voice of nature. There's some that are able to do it with animals and trees and, as you said, rocks, but it has a voice. But because we have been deprogrammed, it's very hard. And when you put yourself in that state, especially when you're doing psychological, I can't even think right now, psychedelic drugs, it opens you up. It takes away the fearfulness. It takes away the restrictions of thoughts and allows you to expand and go in. And one can hear the trees talk. We can hear other things. And because we are in that state, people panic and so forth, and your friends and all that. But the state strips away the fearfulness. which allows you the opportunity to then move around within that realm, those realms of life that are constantly speaking, but we are incapable of hearing because we have been deprogrammed. So when you're in that state and you are receiving information from the rocks because they've been there and they have a story to tell. So yeah, I agree with you that they do have a voice, but I wasn't high when I knew that. But but I do know that nature's constantly speaking to us. It's just again we've been deprogrammed, and so but there are those that are able to be in tune with them, and we see them all day long, so here you are. You guys are experimenting with opening up the self. I had an opportunity to do the graveyard thing, but I couldn't do the graveyard. I was like, I can't do it there. So I was like, I'm not, because I know my mind, and I know I would have been, they would have had to pick me up off of one of those places that we were going to do it. I just couldn't do it because a couple of my friends, we were in there trying, and they did it, and I just pulled out of there because that's not my thing. But I get it. So here you are, you're moving through, you're expanding, you're learning. As you're doing this, how are you then connecting to all of these experiences and bringing them into the natural realm? How are you doing that? How are you managing that transition, if you will?
It was a bit like opening and closing a door for many, many years.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I did that all the time. I communicated with the sky, the elements, the bugs. There was no question that they were alive and I could communicate. So when that happened, it was just like this reawakening, but just in a different context. I didn't think about rocks when I was a kid. But then for the next, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, I kind of closed it down, but I did a lot of meditation and spiritual practice. So I was exploring a different area. But when I came back to the US in 2000 and I started working on people's bodies, these past lives would show up. And in the first couple years, a lot of clients came to me who had been or whose families had been in the concentration camps.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why are all these people showing up? And then I recognized that I had also been in them. So past lives started showing up for me. Their ancestors would show up and start talking through me to them. And it also linked for me why I was so comfortable with many of the people that I met my first couple of years at college, because most of them were of Jewish descent, and I was like right at home. And I couldn't quite figure this out, but it's like, oh, so that became apparent later. So as I started working on people's bodies, things would just start to surface. And so that's when the psychic work and the mediumship work would happen, and the past life work would open up. And the body holds everything, and so does the energy body. So everything that's happened from one lifetime to the next, and all your gifts, your wounds, your brilliance, your downfalls, the ways you've died, ways you've survived, it's all there.
Yeah.
So it just started surfacing, and I kind of just trusted it, because let me back up for a minute. So I had to make a really big choice in, what year was I? Hold on. Around 2000. I was living in Belgium, and my kids were there. They were quite young, and their father was still there. And we were separated, and it was a very, very toxic relationship. And I couldn't work there because they wouldn't accept my degree. So I had to make a decision at some point about what's the best choice for me and the kids. For me to stay, which would have been really, really hard, because I couldn't financially support them cleaning houses or doing things. And I couldn't work professionally. Or is the highest choice for me to go back to the States and legally try to get them to come with me? So I sat with some friends who were part of a meditation group, and I asked them to all hold this question, which they did. And so At the end of the meditation, each one of them said, it's the highest choice for you to go back to the US. And I'm looking at them with swear words running across my mind, like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Like, what? How can that be the highest choice for everyone? And I didn't want that answer. But I surrendered to Spirit and said, Spirit, you're in charge of this process.
Yeah.
And this is kind of like the verification process. If this is really what I'm supposed to do, I'll follow it. But I didn't want to.
Yeah.
But I did. Because my kids were really young. So when I got back to the US, everything I needed was provided for me. I found a car through my old mechanic. My sister offered me a place to stay. Well, I hadn't had a job and lived in the US in 10 years. And who was going to let me rent, right? I found work very, very quickly through an old colleague that I used to do some legal work with and OT work with. She and I worked. She said, oh, I know where I can get you in. A job shows up. I'm like, okay, this is all within like 6 weeks. I'm like, whoa. And then an old friend I traveled with in Europe, came and did a gallery at my house. And suddenly I had a community and I'm going, and then I started doing training and energy work. It's like every single thing I needed was provided.
That's powerful.
It was really, so that whole surrender process to Spirit and just following the guidance pretty much opened the door to, I have to trust what's presented to me. I have to trust Spirit's giving it to me for a reason, and I'll be guided as to how to work with it.
I think
and that's pretty much what I do now.
Yeah, that is one of the spaces I tell people that is very important when you are in your journey. And that is the space by which you must surrender. There is a place that you will come, and that I call it your Garden of Gethsemane. And I remember Jesus had in his Garden of Gethsemane when he came to the end of his will, if you will. And there's this man sweating blood because he has to go beyond where he's not familiar. And he said, not my will, but your will, I surrender. And then he moved through. Yeah. And so I tell people that space by which we all have to come there. And the blessing is beyond that space, right there. Everything is already set up right behind that thing, but it will take that, what we would consider a sacrifice, but I don't think it's a sacrifice. I think that's not the right word I would tell people. It's a humbling. It's an accepting. And when you look at that, it takes you into that realm. And when you get there, it has already been prepared for you. But many people lose it right there because they still believe it is within their ability to push beyond, not knowing, no, that was your place to surrender. And it is really beautiful to hear your story when you recognize it, even through meditation. And I everyone that is listening to my voice, and I tell them all the time, meditation is one of the tools that is given to us here while we're on this planet to usher us into the realm of the spirit. And it's a very peaceful place. It's a place that we enter once we expel that breath. The breath, I tell them, is the bridge by which we cross into that realm. And when you get there, what is there? Information. Lots of information that is necessary to guide you in your life. And so here you are out of your experience of meditation, group meditation, which gives it more energy, and you received your direction, if you will, and you got your direction. You move forward into surrendering and walking into the provision of your destiny. You're here. All look well. You are now happy. This is such a beautiful place because all hell breaks loose sometime right here. So talk to us.
What did I do? Excuse me? Go back? No.
So right here, it's beautiful, but yet there is more learning, because the learning part is to is for you, those questions that you just think, is for you to solidify that yes, I'm in the right spot, but some stuff come. Invite us into the stuff that begin to show up in your life. And this, after you painted this beautiful picture, your sister provided the place, you got the job, all this beautiful stuff. Talk to us and let us know some of the really good stuff that started showing
The
up in your
really
life.
good stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Because it comes, man. It has to come, because this is what it's all about.
There was plenty of it. So anybody who's done any shamanic work knows that it's the deep dive into
Yeah.
the deep, dark pool.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't think I had any stuff, and mine
Yeah.
didn't smell,
Yeah.
and it was all my ex-husband,
Yeah.
who really is pretty crazy, but it's okay. But I was like, sweet and all the, I wasn't totally sweet,
Yeah.
but I still thought it was all him.
Yeah.
Well, I had to really come to grips with some lifetimes when I wasn't so sweet. It was like, whoa, Nelly, I did what? And I thought it was fun. Whoops. And in other words, I was the perpetrator. I'd caused suffering. And I had to come to grips with, how did I cause suffering with my ex-husband and my kids and in my own family? And that was really humbling.
Yeah.
And still I look around, have I caused suffering? Oh God. Yeah. I still am capable of doing it and have to look deeply at what's going on there. So that took me for a good 10 years or more. I'm still working on it.
You got your PhD and stuff.
No kidding. I was like, oh my God. And then one day I woke up, I don't know, I was writing a blog or something. I don't even know how, maybe it came out of meditation, but I realized that my suffering around who my ex-husband was, and I wanted him to be different. And how come I'm always surprised by how he behaves? Like, what? How can he do that?
Yeah.
Was totally because I refused to accept who he was, what he was, and how he behaved. It was my refusal to accept him and my ego that wanted him to change that caused me to suffer.
Yeah.
When that light bulb went off, I went, oh. And I no longer engaged in the same way. I just disengaged. And it was like, and I just saw him actually in May. And he's still suffering. And I could just be there and be compassionate, but not engage with it. So that was a really tough one.
Compassionate detachment. I had to learn that. It's a powerful lesson, isn't it?
It is. And I could actually feel the depth of his pain.
Yeah.
And understand what, just on not a global, but a larger level, just that he hadn't taken the opportunity, or that wasn't his journey to do some healing around it. And how incredibly painful that was for him and for my kids as well.
Yeah.
To have to be around that. So that was one piece of it. So learning about past life stuff when I wasn't such a sweetheart, having to deal with his stuff, and also realizing, I think I had to really come to that with my mother as well. Yeah. She eventually developed dementia, and I was, again, responsible for the one overseeing her care at a distance and all that for years. But it was a really a good opportunity to just be able to be kind and loving, even though I didn't like her. Yeah. It was okay. I could still serve her and be in her and try to do what was the best thing for her towards the latter years of her life. So that meant a lot of forgiveness and acceptance, and a lot of turning, the Ho'oponopono prayer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really like looking at, okay, how did my actions hurt her? Yeah. Well, again, I thought I was, and then I realized, my distancing with her because I didn't like her, created pain for her.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I just thought it was survival and smart. But
Yeah.
in fact, it caused her pain. So continually looking at what was the relationship between my unhealed stuff and how did that cause someone else suffering?
Yeah.
Was a really, it's still a journey I look at.
It'll be a journey until you pass, because I think we are so deep that it takes, as you say, several lifetimes for one to unfold the beauty that is you. And I remember being a caregiver to my mom and my dad when my mom had died, had a stroke, and was in a coma, and she came back out, and because of a physician mistake. And I remember visiting her and my dad, and uh, and the nurse had left, and my mom, I'm sitting there talking with her, and my dad spending time with them, and I smelled my mom. She had made on herself, and I knew both of them. My dad couldn't help my mother, and I remember sitting there and looking at them and realizing, as a man, that my relationship with my mom was about to change. And I remember um, actually walking myself through that and uh, thought to myself, what an honor that I'm able to do this for her, because I was a pain in my parents' ass. And so I was that black sheep from a young boy. And I remember um, talking with my mom and explaining to her that it was my time to serve her, and because I could see her, um, and I made her aware. I says, "Mom, I am honored because I know what I have put you through," and so we got a chance to spend much time because, as I said, I saw it change my relationship, and I became the caregiver to my mom and dad for um, uh, about a year and a half as a result. But it's a really interesting space to be because it is humbling, and so many different emotions live there that you learn of yourself. And it's an honorable place because I, as you, didn't like my parents much. And then because of some of the trauma that was birthed from that relationship, but we became really good friends and we healed. And it was an opportunity for us to get a chance to talk and
Mm-hmm.
experience each other before they passed on. And so it is a great place to be, but it is a humbling place. Here you are, you got a chance to visit and be with mom. And you saw much of self as you are beginning to learn and excavate deeper about you. And you're moving through, you're dealing with all of the past lives, you're seeing all these different things, accumulating information, you're meditating, you're journaling, you're blogging, all of these things. What was happening to you as you have all of these things coming from all these directions? You have the spiritual, you have emotional, you have all of these entities and information landing into you. Talk to us as to how did you manage it? How did it begin to form you? And what perspective did you start to bring in front of you? You began to shift yourself.
The really good question. The first thing that comes to mind is something that my shamanic teacher taught me, which was that, of course, there's no blame.
Yeah.
We all sign up to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And one life you're the victim, one life you're the perpetrator, one lifetime you're the witness. So it's all designed for you to be able to try out these different positions and have a wide range of experiences to expand your consciousness.
Yeah.
That understanding was, for me, the linchpin that allowed me to go into these difficult places with less judgment or
Yes.
no judgment, hopefully, and just to accept what's here to be learned and to be gained. So that was really critical because I also had this propensity to be in a victim place from when I was a child. There was a lot of stuff that happened and set that energetic up for me.
Well, you try to swim
And
in the pool.
I wanted to dive. I just learned how to dive into the pool, So I wanted to try it while I'm waiting for my friend. I gave up the picnic table, why not? Yeah.
So
I thought I would, maybe that contributed to what happened to me later. But okay.
Yeah.
And I never told anyone until I was about 18. And my mother said, "You never told anyone?" I went, "No. Are you crazy?" Like, why would I tell them that? She's really stupid or something else. No. But that actually helped me get through a lot of experiences where I took on dark energies unwittingly, because every time I was in that place, I had to look at what part of my own shadow have I not fully embraced and owned and healed. So that was a lot was going on with me. Simultaneously, I had to also, this keeps showing up, so I'm just going to talk about it.
Yeah.
I am really grateful that I can work as a medium, because I've had many conversations with my mother since she passed, like 9 years ago or so, maybe 10. And I got to understand that we keep evolving as souls, even when we've left the body.
Yeah.
And so the first time she shows up, she goes, "I forgive you." I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" Like, huh? I did my best here, pal. and then, like, I don't know about this. She was still pretty cheeky, like, And the next time she shows up, she said, "I guess I wasn't a great mom." I said, "No, you weren't, but you did your best."
Yeah.
So then a little more time goes by, and then she shows up and she says, "I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
I see what I put you through." And I could feel and see how she was unveiling her own history and getting to the essence of who she was and forgiving herself and asking for forgiveness. And then I had a conversation with her about what happened with the person who was my father that I never knew about.
Yeah.
And so there was all these levels of, I had to just be open and accept that I don't know, and it will be revealed. So it's been a process of opening, going deep, opening, going deep. It's not been a straightforward process, but as I heal each layer, I feel more of my essence and more of a place where I just want to serve.
Yeah.
And I don't have so many judgments anymore in me, and I'm not the perfectionist quite that I used to be. I still have some perfectionism, but I've softened.
Yeah.
I got some of it still.
Yeah, I have my straightforwardness that my sister told me I needed to be a little more tactful. And so once in a while, it'll come up where I have no patience with the tactfulness. So I get it. So you're always learning. I use the analogy of a plane. When a plane takes off to go to a destination, it's never a straight line. There's a couple of things laws that needed to be enacted in order for that plane to start flying. And that is, it has to break a law in order to engage another law. And so that is the journey of our walk. You have this plane that is stationary, and it needs to pick up momentum, which will then take it into the law of flight. Once it reaches a certain space and speed. When you get into the law of flight, you bypass all the laws that keep you in the ground, the law of gravity that you had a wonderful chance to experience as a young girl after she dies off this table. Um, and then when you get to that level, it could be really nice and rosy, but that's not a flight's go. The direction is that plane is going, but it's never in a straight line. There's things that we are familiar with as flyers. It's called turbulence. Turbulence can be all kinds of different types. There's so many different types of turbulence. But when that happens, the plane is moving, and that pilot, who we are, is adjusting based on the type of turbulence comes. But the compass that we use and the pilot use, that is what's guiding that direction is that we are committed to growth. That is our compass. And that compass is constantly being tested because we are tossed all over the place based on the type of turbulence that shows up. But eventually, that plane will land. And so that is life. It will land, and you will then take off to another destination. And that's what we do. And I believe we will land and land and fly until we die. So, and then after there, like your mom, she was still flying, landing and flying and coming back and having conversations with you. So this is who we are, and this is what it's about. And so I always try to invite people to come. Hurry up and get here. And I tell people the reason why many people haven't done anything yet is because I tell them, you are circular, you're living a circular life. I can tell that by letting that individual speak. And once you begin to speak, you can locate them. They're circular because I tell them you're circular because you haven't made a decision yet. The human being is designed that once it's made a decision, I call that decision the statement of faith. That means that statement, you believe it more than anyone else in this planet. And you will then enact the corresponding actions necessary to escort you to make that a possibility because you believe it more than anybody on this planet. Until you get there, you will always live a circular life. And so I invite folks to come in. I have someone here that has been through some stuff, and I use the clean language because I'm on the podcast. Because I tell people, make sure that the person that you're sitting in front of and that you're entrusting to guide you, they have to go through some stuff. Because if they have just gone to the master class, and they come out with a certificate, they don't know nothing. And you will find them in a minute, and you will locate them and go to yourself, what am I doing here? They are one-dimensional. They were never tested. They have never gone through. And they cannot understand and guide you. But I got somebody here on this podcast that been through some stuff.
Yep.
That can guide you guys. And those that are listening, I'm going to provide everything for you because I want you to get into her space so that you can be guided, so that you can get off of that circular mentality. It's a thinking that you must begin to get some insights. The reason why I say that you have to find someone who's been through some stuff is this, because they know the question from the conversation that they're having. They know the question because they've been where you're at. They know the question that they were not able to ask themselves until after they've gone through. And because they know the question to bring the results that is necessary to move you through, because like I said, they've been through some stuff, you'll be able to move through yours much faster than you will ever in your life. It's like taking the elevator when you bring a coach and someone with that ability to walk with you. It is taking the elevator versus walking. And so I want to invite you guys. I'm going to provide everything for you. So here you are. You're going through some stuff, girl. You
Yeah,
are
I
growing.
have.
You are expanding, and you are learning and practicing your craft, if you will. I'm very fascinated with the scientific piece, because that to me, when you are seeing folks being put down, if you will, medically or by drugs and put down, but they're still able to communicate. And you mentioned that your friends and the nurses will come to you and because you need to have a conversation. And of course, Western medicine will say to you, your license is going to be lost. And because we are a legalistic society in Western civilization. So when you had the opportunity to speak to that, because you are serving, what were some of those situations that you had to escort some of those? Because to me, that is a fascinating place because that person is somewhere. When you were communicating with them, what was that like and what was said?
I'm thinking of one fellow who was in a coma. He was going to die, and he had maybe 6 or 7 people around, some of whom were his siblings, and he couldn't communicate. I don't even remember physically what was wrong with him. He was probably on a vent or something, but his brain wasn't operating fully. He went around the room, vis-a-vis through me, and acknowledged what he appreciated or how he loved this person or said goodbye, except for one sibling who he said, I'm really not okay with what you did, blah, blah, blah. It was not a positive interaction. In fact, he was still like miffed at him about something. And that sibling got so mad at me.
Wow.
He's like, how can you? Because, I'm just the pizza delivery person. Don't shoot me. I'm sorry you don't like pepperoni, the really spicy one, but that's what you ordered. Oh, and you asked for extra chilies. and this is, and I couldn't. When I'm channeling somebody or I'm listening to somebody, I do not change the verbiage and I don't change the tone because they are putting their trust in me to communicate it as accurately as possible. Everybody else was so grateful. They were like, oh my God, they had closure there. They felt like they got to, communicate their love for their sibling or their family member. It was like peace actually came over everybody. It's like, okay, I'm so grateful we could have this conversation because there's no other way we could do it. We can say our goodbyes. And that's a lot of what happens in a mediumship session too. This completion. And I couldn't do anything for this one member other than to say, I'm really sorry, but this is how he expressed it. And I can't change that. And I'm sorry it's difficult for you to hear. So that was one of them. And for me, it's really an honor to be in that sacred relationship because it's really a heart-opening experience whenever I do that, whether it's I'm doing a reading or mediumship. Other times, because I have shamanic background, I could also see when people had some really dark energies that were running the show. And were blocking them from feeling their own light essence, because that's the core of who we all are. And that it was creating some obstacles for them in healing, or maybe being able to open to receiving some medical intervention, or they were just being miserable in their lives. And so I would very respectfully say, there's an energy that's hanging on to you. Would it be okay if I released it? And I very discreetly, I didn't make a lot of sound or noise. I just very discreetly moved it on. And they would shift from being cranky and miserable and really, pain in the backside, to really being calm and centered and so grateful. Like, okay, I can deal now. So that was another example. And then the other one was when maybe somebody was transitioning or getting ready to transition. And there would be a loved one there to help them, or maybe there was an angelic being or a spirit guide to help them. And I would just say, I don't know how I did it, but I would ask permission. Is it okay if I share what I'm observing, or I have an awareness of something? And inevitably, I used to wait for it to happen 3 times. Say it. Okay. By the 3rd time, all right, I'll do it. Because it's kind of like, I'm not supposed to be doing this here. So I would ask, and then I would communicate what was there for them. And again, whenever that happened, because Spirit was guiding me to do it, it was always well received, and people were so grateful, and this great relief. And when others' energies are in people's bodies, they can wreak havoc on the physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual aspect of us. And when it's released, people can feel so much more at peace and like themselves again, and feel clear, and know where they're going. So those are the 3 areas that I would often intervene in before my boss told me I'd lose my license.
Yeah, they wouldn't do that. My background is I was in the development and operational piece of healthcare, where I would be upfront and dealing with the development of the marketing department, or network development, dealing with physicians and stuff like that. And so I got a chance to be within that space. And the legal aspect of healthcare in the United States is really interesting, So it is more of a legalistic system than any other system, where you were exposed to. European system is much different, and then you have the Asian system, also much different. And so it's just a cultural thing. But here you are, you're exposed to all of it, basically walking around, and getting a chance to expand your self. So here you are in your prime of life, after you've gone through all this stuff. I got to clean it up. I got to come back, and you're here. What do you see, or what are you witnessing that is beginning to happen in you as you are sitting here in this space at this time? What are you noticing as you are moving through in your life at this present moment?
Well, we were supposed to talk last week, but I couldn't get the technology to align with what I needed to do. So I couldn't show up last week. And as you mentioned, you weren't supposed to. I'm like, yeah. I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh God, what are you doing?
That's okay.
It's like 10:25. Okay, fine. I figured it out. That was a little too late.
Yeah.
However, what has happened between now and then, which of course was a perfect alignment, is 2 people have said to me, do you teach? And I'm like, no. I don't want to teach how to do. I don't. Go to Suzanne Giesman if you want to, have a mediumship T-shirt.
Yeah.
I don't teach it. I just do it. And then someone else on this call yesterday says, "Do you teach?" And I'm like, "Okay." I got it before the 3rd time. All right. Fine. So what? And I sent out a newsletter yesterday. So what I've been guided to do is to open up like a monthly meeting with people who are just curious about energy medicine, mediumship, psychic readings, essential oils, flower essences, just energetic support tools.
Yeah.
And to just start introducing it, to have a conversation with people, maybe to guide them a little bit here and there, to hear their experiences. So I'm going to post it on Facebook and on LinkedIn. It's under my name. And I'm just like, okay, let's see what happens. Because what the woman who I was talking to yesterday said to me is, I work in computers. And then I have this other life where I'm really curious and I've studied all these other things, but I don't know how to bridge them.
Yeah.
And then I kind of went, okay, she's curious, she's open, she wants to figure out how to bring this awareness into a community where she thinks people are not open to it, but of course they're open, they just don't know.
Yes.
She just has to hold that vibrational frequency and trust it. And so she inspired me to do that. So that's why I'm here today instead of last week.
See? So this is for someone that is listening, is going to be listening to this podcast, is that they needed this information, and that is why it happened. So we will provide all the links and everything so that you guys can have access to this, one of these beautiful souls that I've had in my presence, in my space. And I am so honored that she allowed me to be intimate with her from the conversations that she shared, and I hope that it does the same to you. I want to thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment and laughing with me.
This has been such a joy to be with you, Ken, on so many levels, where you can go do the deep dive and see the absurdity and the beauty. And I really feel your beautiful open heart so fully. Thank you for being of service and offering me this opportunity to be with you. I wish you lived next door.
Yeah, imagine that. The conversations.
Absolutely. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay.